Welcome back to EDH on a Budget. I'm your host, Iceman. Today we're going to be going over part 2 of Blue Land Ramp. And we have, first up, Mirror Maid. So Mirror Maid has, you for one blue, this enchantment says you may have Mirror Maid enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. So it doesn't have to be yours, it could be anybody's, but the way to ramp with this is to have artifact lands. So I've already gone over this in white. There's a lot of ways to have artifact lands or to make a land an artifact like liquid metal coating. But regardless, what you want to do is for 3 mana you pay this, you target an artifact land, and now this becomes a land. That is the some people are going to say, well, I'd rather use this on a 8 mana, something big and make a big difference. But the problem is that's not going to happen on turn 3, most likely. Most likely that's going to be late in the game. Do you really want to have this as a dead card for the next 4 or 5 turns if you can ramp now and then get to those late game big turn plays later? So it's really just nice to have the option and to keep this in mind that if you're playing this in your deck, you might want to consider throwing in some artifact lands just in case. I've definitely used an effect like this because I just really needed to hit my land drop and I wasn't getting it. And in order to make my next turn playable, I needed to get that land this turn. So it is something to keep in mind. Mirror Maid is a little bit up there at $2.30, but definitely worth it if you were to play it in those right decks. Next, we have Hulking Metamorph for 10 cents. This is a flexible card. It says it costs 9 mana, but it has Prototype where you play this for 2 blue, and you could have Hulking Metamorph enter the battlefield as a copy of an artifact or creature you control, except it's an artifact creature in addition to its other types, and its power and toughness are equal to the power, which is, if you paid the 9 mana, then it's a 7/7, and you would never want to target a land pretty much with that. But for the 2 blue, it would be a 3/3 land or artifact creature, assuming you targeted an artifact land. And again, this is something to keep in mind if you're having troubles getting your land and you want to ramp out faster. The artifact decks also have many ways to reduce casting costs, and if you reduce it to anything at all, then it's just really good ramp instead of just okay ramp. Next up, we have Echo Storm for 10 cents. This card costs 3 blue, and it's a sorcery. Don't get thrown off by that yet. Stay with me. It says, when you cast a spell, copy it for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. You may choose new targets for the copies. So create a token that's a copy of target artifact. Again, the first section of these will be copying artifacts, so you do want those artifact lands. But regardless, if you cast your commander, or if you have partner commanders, that's multiple commanders being cast, you're going to want to have a cheaper commander if you're playing this in your deck. That makes no sense to play this if your commander's 6, 7, 8 mana or more. Even 5 is going to be tough, because when you play this Echo Storm, you're going to want to be able to cast it and copy something 2, 3, or more times. So, and it does have to be from the command zone, so you can't just bounce it to your hand and recast it. You could copy this spell to get more effects of this, but regardless, you're going to want to have a commander that is ideally, I'd say, about 3 mana or less. That way, there's a decent chance you can recast that commander a couple of times and get this full effect. And this doesn't say copy of target artifact you control, so it could be anybody's artifact. Next up, we have Sculpting Steel. Sculpting Steel is only 38 cents and is 3 mana. This artifact says you may have Sculpting Steel enter the battlefield as a copy of any artifact on the battlefield. So again, you can copy a land on turn 3 and it just doesn't say enter tapped, so again, you get that mana right away. Next up, we have mechanized production for 38 cents. It's an aura for 2 blue blue. This enchantment it says enchant artifact you control at the beginning of your upkeep. Create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact. Then, if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. So it obviously is a win con if you're to play it on something that already has lots of, you know, cards with the same name, like treasure, for instance, or clue if you're in a clue deck, food if you're in a food deck, etc. They all have the same name, so you could play this and try to win. Or early game, if you have an artifact land, again, play it on that. And this will just ramp you a land every single turn untapped. And I mean, the odds. I feel the odds of playing this on turn 4 and winning with it, in 10 turns or however 8 turns is slim. Somebody's going to remove that land or going to remove mechanized production, but it's more about the value you get from all those lands. Plus, I think it'd be interesting if somebody's playing these cards in a blue landfall deck. That would be very interesting deck with all these. Next up, we have replication technique. Replication technique is a sorcery for 4 and a blue, and it has demonstrate. When you cast a spell, you may copy it. If you do choose an opponent to also copy it, players may choose new targets for their copies. And the actual spell says create a token that's a copy of target permanent you control. So this does have to be a permanent you control, not one of your opponents. Again, this does not have to be an artifact land, though. It could be any land. It could be any creature, anything like that. So I don't know if you want to get 2 lands necessarily around turn 5, but it is certainly an option that will set you up, especially if you have some board wipes in your hand. You could choose to copy some lands and then maybe still get that board wipe to go off and just be up mana on everybody else. And I'll show you a picture of some of the artifact lands in here, but I'm not going to be going over them again. On the next video, there'll be a different way to ramp with blue, and there's probably I'd say about 2 more ways, with some random ways that blue can ramp. So if you don't mind liking, sharing, and subscribing this, help this channel grow, I would appreciate it. Thanks.